welcome everybody. Buenas noches to everybody and everybody who's watching us. Bienvenidos. We're gonna talk about a little bit about youth justice, healing, liberation. So welcome. I'm gonna hand the palabra before we start to John to do a land acknowledgement in the 4 directions. So John.
Thank you, Frida. So my name is John Perez. I'll do my conocimiento here in just a minute, but before we get started talking in this plática, we want to do a couple of things to get started. We definitely want to acknowledge the land that this belongs to, and so we want to recognize the Cheyenne and the Arapaho people and a variety of other folks, the Kiowa, the Lakota, that traded on this land over the years. And so we just want to ask permission in a good way to have this space and to talk about the things we're going to talk about tonight. And yeah, we have our fire burning. We're going to keep the cedar going throughout the plática and hopefully do this in a good way. And so before we get started, what we also want to do is we also want to take a moment to bring into the space, our ancestors in a good way. And so our Mexica lens is, we honor the directions to honor those folks. And so if you all just bear with me as we honor the directions and the way that we do it in our Mexica tradition, we don't want to leave anybody out, but that's the tradition that we're going to honor today is those Mexica people. And so when we honor the directions, we want to look to the east. And when we look to the east, we want to recognize all of the men in our lives. That's the fathers, the grandfathers, the uncles, the friends, the tios, all of the men in our lives that have contributed to our lives in a good way. And we want to show respect to them and bring them into the space. Without our ancestors, we're not anybody, or without our men in our lives, we're not anybody. And so we want to honor those people in a good way. Excuse me. And then we're going to turn and we're going to face west. And when we face west, we honor all of the women in our lives. And so these are our moms, our nanas, our tias, all of the people that have been significant in our lives in terms of the women in our lives. And so we want to honor those folks in a good way and pay respect to them. Then we turn to our north. And when we look to the north, we honor the elders and our ancestors. And so these are, our elders that provide that wisdom for us. They bring that medicine for us so that we can survive, and we have that past, that lineage that we can bring into a space. And then also the ones that passed on, the ancestors, we bring them into the space, and so we can talk about these things that we're going to talk about with food sovereignty, healing, liberation, and just how we move the work forward. And so we bring those people into our space so we can do that in a good way as well. Then we turn to the south, and then we honor that generation, the younger generation, right? And so the kids that are in our lives, I have a slew of nieces and nephews and godchildren, and just children everywhere, all the young people that need these prayers and this medicine that we're going to be talking about today to bring health and healing to their lives. And so we want those kids and those youth to be in a good space as we talk about some of the things we're going to talk about. Who else we want to honor? The sacred space between. We have a lot of our people that don't identify as, male or female, our non-binary folks, our transgender folks, our two spirits. All of these people are important to bring into our space as well, because they're also underneath that umbrella. And so we just want to honor them in a good way. We want to look up. We want to honor, the sun, Tonatiuh. We want to honor him in a good way for the warmth and the growth on the earth and all of those kinds of things. And that warmth in our heart, we want to honor the sun in that good way. And then we look to the earth, we want to bring in Mother Earth into this as well. And so we honor her. Tonantzin is what we call her. And so we want to honor her in a good way and have blessings for what she provides for us, our food, our animals, all the creatures on the planet, us, everything that she brings to the space. And so we want to honor her in a good way. And then most importantly, we want to come to the center and we want to honor ourselves. We have to take care of ourselves, and we want to honor ourselves in a good way by taking care of ourselves. So, with that, I'll close with that. I'll say about that much and just say I'm glad to be in the space with all of you. And I'm really excited for this conversation. It's definitely something that I think about often. And so, we'll close on that, and I'll pass the palabra back to Frida, and I'll say about that much.
Thank you, John. Thank you for doing that for us. So we're going to move to the conocimiento just to build relationship and for our audience and everybody to know who we are. I asked John if he can share his altar with us. I think it's very important to show our most authentic self to everybody. So that was my thought into it. So I really want to thank John for that and also for holding the fire for us. I appreciate you. And even though it's via the internet, I hope that you can feel the love and the energy through it. So that's why I really wanted to channel that through this plática. So if I can ask the members, so we have Paloma, John, and Philip who join our staff, and they're going to talk a little bit about themselves and their program. So if you all can say your name, your pronouns, your maternal lineage, your position, and I also asked the staff to bring something that they would put in this altar. It's something that we would do in person. So I really wanted to, again, channel that through the online world. So I will start the conocimiento. So my name is Frida Fernanda Soto Leiva. I am daughter of Rita Leiva Hernandez, granddaughter of Rosa Hernandez Gutierrez, and great-granddaughter of Justita Gutierrez Mares, and great-granddaughter of Vicenta Santana. We are all from Las Nieves, Durango, and I was really, I was sharing with John and Angel earlier that I was really excited to share that because I had a conversation with my grandma in December about my maternal lineage because I never knew about that. So I want to honor them and thank them for doing the sacrifice that they did for me to be here today. So I really wanted to name that. The programs that I do, I'm the Girls Program Manager. So I oversee Wiliti and Girasol. And Wiliti is youth. It's for youth that serves as a rite of passage. They learn about themselves, the sacred self, culture, and rooted in la cultura cura. And sorry, Wiliti is a Nahua word that translates to strength and power. It's an advanced liberating program for girls of color. So they tap into their sacredness in that way. So I'll say that much about that. So an item that I brought today for the altar that I would put in altar is my medicine bag. And this medicine bag, I made it, and Maestra Maggie, we had a workshop with her. So if you're watching this, Maestra Maggie, I appreciate it because you taught me how to make this. And it's just a symbolism of like what I can pass down to other generations because it was never taught to me. So I wanted to honor that and put this in an altar because it's a very important item to me. So I will pass the palabra back to John.
Thank you, Frida, for sharing that. So like I said, my name is John Eugene Perez Jr. And my maternal lineage is I'm the son of Elaine Patricia Flores, grandson of Josie Flores, and great-grandson of Adelia Valdez. I've been told my family is from the Aguilar, Colorado area with connections to Hopi and to Blackfeet tribes. You know, a lot of us have kind of lost kind of connection beyond our great grandparents. So that's about as far as it goes. And so, like I said, from what I've been told, you know, most of my family is here from Aguilar, Colorado, a little bit from New Mexico and that kind of thing. And so, you know, that journey continues, still looking in terms of like where my lineage continues on to. So, you know, that's my own research that I'm doing. But my position here at Colorado Circles for Change is Deputy Director. And I recently was brought on to the team in the last month, and I'm really, really grateful. You know, I come from a background working in systems, government, youth diversion, and those kinds of things. And so, you know, I'm okay with talking about some of those kinds of things, which I'll talk about a little bit later in terms of why I made the transition and kind of my plan moving forward and you know, my sacred purpose and those kinds of things. But, you know, I wear, you know, a lot of hats. You know, I'm certainly a facilitator, a circle keeper, a healer. I'm learning a little bit about the financial aspect of nonprofit. I'm learning a little bit more about organizational structures and those kinds of things. So, you know, a lot of these things are super foreign to me. maybe a month ago, I'd have considered myself just a kid from the north side. That's really my power. I think where I come from, my neighborhood, I'm really proud of. But, I've had quite a few experiences in bringing me to this space. And, I want to recognize Angel Perez, our executive director, for doing that. So she has such a vision that I believe in, which we'll talk about that in just a minute. But I'm super happy to be here. I'm really grateful for all of you being on the screen with me and welcoming me in a good way. And just really happy to be here. So thank you so much for that. So I'll say about that much, and then I will go ahead and pass the palabra to Philip.
Good evening, guys. My name is Philip Paul Roybal. I am the son of Mitzi Oskol and the grandson of Anna Oskol. Both my grandmother and mother were born here in Denver and at DG and grew up in Curtis Park. They both relocated to East Oakland. My position here with the program with Cardo Circles for Change is I'm the Youth Justice Organizing Manager, which is a partnership with the National Center for Youth Law. What I do is I do policy work. The item that I brought today is an item that was given to me. This particular item that I have on me is not the one that was given to me, but this one, it was made in remembrance of that. My brother, Michael Roybal, was murdered on September 23rd of 2019. And a few days after the funeral, his girlfriend at the time had this Movado watch that was his, and she gave it to me and said that that was something that he would want me to have. And I held on to the watch for a few months. I ended up losing the watch. From then, I was able to have another watch kind of made with his picture in it to kind of always remember remember him, but not only just remember him, just remember the time that I was able to kind of spend with him. My brother was gone for most of my life outside of small times where he was home. But this last time he had just got done doing a 10-year bid, came home, and we kind of spent a little bit of time together. And so the watch also reminds me of that, of the time that I was able to kind of build with him. And I think looking back now, I think the day that he left us was coming. It was already kind of said, and I think it was pre-planned that I needed to spend that time with him. But this is the watch here. There's a photo of him inside of the watch, and in the back, it's inscribed. You can't see what the inscribed says, but I'll read it. It says, "A life, if well lived, is lived long enough." Then it has a date that he passed, which is 9/23 of 2019. So this watch holds a lot of significance for me. It symbolizes the watch that they gave me that I should have held on to, but it also symbolizes again the time that I was able to kind of spend with him prior to him passing. I will now pass the palabra over to Paloma.
Hi, I'm Paloma Soto Leiva, she, hers, ella. Soy la hija de Rita Leiva Hernández y la nieta de Rosa Gutierrez Hernández. They're both from Las Nieves, Durango. I'm the Healthyhood Initiative Program Assistant, and it's a program, where we provide nutritious and culturally relevant foods, to take off that financial burden for our families, because healthy food isn't super accessible or affordable for people. And so the item I brought was this picture of me and my sister Frida. That's when we're little. This picture means a lot to me because we've been together our whole lives. And she's always been there for me for everything. And yeah, I'm just really grateful for her. And she's very special to me, and she's badass. And I'm sure she's very special to other people as well. So yeah. I'll pass the palabra back to Frida.
Finding my mute button. Thank you all for sharing that. I appreciate you bringing your heart and spirit into this, which is the next segment, the corazón y mente. And I explained a little bit to y'all when we were prepping for this, like the sentipensante, like you have to be connected to your mind, body, and soul to show up the best way. And that's how CCFC leads. It leads with the heart, mind, and spirit. And I wanted to tell a little story of like what me and Philip were talking about the other day. You know, I shared with Philip that my mom is una sobadora, so she that's her gift, that's her don that was given to her. And I was explaining like all these like what my mom does, and Philip was like, oh, that's like a technical word, and he like told me, right now I can't remember, but he told me like, you know, people go to school for that. And then it's just like, but for me it's like natural, like that came natural to me, and it's something that has been in my culture for a very long time. And that's basically what CCFC allows to do. It's in the mission, it's mission and values is rooted in that, for us to show up with our heart, mind, and spirit. So I wanted to have you all share a little bit about that, and not only like your connection to the program and what you do in the program. So just tell me a little bit, why CCFC, why do you do the work that you do, and what is your vision for the future? So if we can start with Philip, I'll send the palabra your way.
You know, just to piggyback off of what Frida said, CCFC has the ideas and the vision and the heart to have an understanding of who we are as a people, and where we come from, and that, and how important that connection is, and taking these practices back to where they kind of originated from. We are the original man, and a lot of these things have been, you know, placated and taken over, but a lot of this work we've always done. It's culturally rooted in all of the practices that we have. My technical title with the organization, or technically what I do, is I'm the Youth Justice Organizing Manager, which is, it's policy work. I am the liaison, our community connection between our policy team and the community, and educating the community on policies that need to be changed, as well as educating my team, the YJI team, on things that the community feels that needs to be changed. This hits home personally for me. Back in 1998, I was in the 7th grade. I was about 12 years old, getting ready to turn 13 years old. I was expelled out of Jefferson County School because of something that I did outside of school, which was considered a property crime. It wasn't even a violent crime. It wasn't even a crime against a person. There was a victim, yes, in terms of the person that the property was owned to. However, but because of that said incident, I was expelled out of school. What I didn't know then, well, at that point in time, we had only been in school for maybe a month. Well, at that point in time, it was only 2 weeks. And so what I didn't know was that I would never complete the 8th grade. So this subsequent thing that I had participated in and I take accountability for as a young man set me up for failure. It set me up long-term to not finish middle school, to never attend high school, not one day, and set me on the path to the Department of Youth Corrections later on, which happened a few years later, where I was committed for 2 years. Following that, I was committed to the Department of Corrections for another 6 years. But I was able to kind of bring myself back. A lot of our youth are not able to kind of have that experience of the school to prison pipeline, where these things start at such a small level, with these practices that are set in place by the Board of Education and by the state of Colorado that set these children up for failure. I had a very strong support system with my family, as well as I had the stability of, there was 2 things that were always stable in my life, regardless of kind of what I was doing. One of them was my family, the other was the gym. So I always kind of had that to fall back on. A lot of our youth do not have that, and they're not able to kind of rebound. And you see some youth who are railroaded with double-digit time, 10, 15, 20 years as young men, where they don't get to experience life. They don't get to experience what they could have become, you know? So this work is very, very much, it's personal to me. It's very personal to me. So with the Youth Justice Initiative, there's policies that we're currently working on that we're getting ready to roll out in the legislative session here coming up in February, where I will testify at the legislative session and, you know, give my testimony in terms of why these practices are predatory and they do our communities no good, and they're fucking racist. They're not set up for us to win. So I'm excited and I'm honored to be able to meet the women here at CCFC and to be led by Angel Perez and the organization that she's been able to create, and to give me a platform to be able to kind of even be within these spaces and speak my truth and give my experience and help the youth kind of learn and understand that these are not our ways, and that there is another path for us. And my vision, you know, overall is that this policy work is very technical, and a lot of these things that are set up there are meant to set that way, where they go over our head and we feel overwhelmed and we don't feel like we're worthy enough to be in these spaces. But fuck that, we do. These are public forums that we need to be in and that we should be in. And so when you're looking at change needs to happen from the top down and the bottom up. The top down meaning the lawmakers and the policymakers, and the bottom up from the organizations doing the grassroots work. And with CCFC, with Colorado Circles for Change, we're fucking them up on both ends. We have somebody like myself and the YJI team who's going to be in there changing the policy, but we also have young men and women in our organization that are doing the groundwork. So when we're looking at true change, we're going to change it from the top down and the bottom up. We're going to change the system from inside and out. So where they fucked up is they allowed me to get a degree, and they allowed me to kind of understand how these things work. And now I'm coming back, and we're going to make sure that we set the tone for our youth to come back and be strong. I'll pass the palabra over to John. Or no, Paloma. Paloma's next. Come on, girl.
Trying to skip me.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. So why CCFC? Well, I've been with them since like around 2016. Like my sister Frida, she like started bringing me around. And then I got involved in like programs, like volunteering. I had an internship with them through my school for a while. And yeah, throughout those years, you know, they've done a lot for me, and I've learned a lot from them as well. And I wanted to be like a part of them, you know, like just be a part of something bigger than myself. And so I do the work I do because, so there's this thing called food apartheid. I don't know exactly, but yeah. Which is a system that results from racist policies and racist practices, where there is a lack of grocery stores in good quality food in low income communities and non-white communities as well. So I live that. I live like on the edge of Globeville, and literally what's close to me is that's across the street. It's a liquor store and a convenience store. The nearest store I can think of is Save-A-Lot, which even then is still a couple miles away, and obviously, you know, not the best like quality food. And it's mostly what I can name that's around me is fast food, you know, McDonald's, Wendy's, Taco John's, Burger King. That's literally all down the street. And, you know, instead of a grocery store, maybe. And yeah, I grew up eating Burger King because my mom worked there. And so like she struggled, you know, with money, obviously. So she couldn't afford to buy us food all the time. So, you know, she would sneak us some Burger King on the daily. And yeah, so and also when and if we got food banks, most of the food was, you know, canned food or expired foods. So when CCFC started the Healthy Hood Initiative program, you know, I started off as a volunteer, and then I took some charge of some things, and then eventually now I help lead it and manage it, coordinate it. Yeah, I think it's great to be able to support our families, which, you know, are also impacted by that system, and be able to give them the food they deserve. And then, yeah, a vision I have is, I kind of want to have like a community garden, you know, where we grow our own vegetables, fruits, whatever it is. And I think it would be a great idea to use that in the food banks we do, the food boxes we do. That would be cool. And also, you know, if they need it, they could also go there and get it themselves. Yeah, I think that would assure, you know, food sovereignty for people, because, you know, they know where the food comes from and they have a saying of their food. So yeah, I feel like that would give our community self-sustainability that they need. Yeah. And then I'll pass the palabra to John.
Thank you, Ulama, for that. I have to back up a little bit. I forgot to do a couple of things. Frida gave me specific instructions of how to do the conocimiento, and I left out a couple of things. And my pronouns are he, him, his. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my altar piece because it kind of connects a little bit to my own healing and my own liberation and all of those kinds of things in terms of where I'm at today. And so the piece that I brought that I wanted to add to the altar was this obsidian rock that I picked up in the Yucatan. It's maybe been, 6-7 years now. My kids were still in high school. And so we went to a resort, we went to Playa del Carmen, and we made the trip into Chichen Itza to see the pyramids. And I didn't know too much about my cultural past in terms of the difference between the Mayan culture in the Yucatan and the Aztecs up north there. And so I learned a little bit about that. And so I learned a little bit about the Nahuatl and the Mexica were a little bit more known for, I guess, being warriors. And then the Mayan were more so known as for healing. And so that obsidian rock that I got, I was kind of informed that it has an energy to it, and it brings a healing energy and a positive energy to any space that you bring it into. And so I've always carried that. You know, I've carried it for about, like I said, the last 6 or 7 years, running space, running healing circles and those kinds of things. And I always have it there just because it's a safe thing for me to remember that I'm still on this healing journey. And so, you know, I get into that question about why CCFC. But, you know, before I guess I get into the specific to that, I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of where my journey began to get me to this place, why I chose CCFC as far as what I want to do with the rest of my life, I suppose. And so, you know, like I said, I grew up in North Denver. You know, I went to Bryant Webster Elementary School, Beach Court Elementary School, Horseman Middle School, graduated from North, went to CCD downtown, and then went to Metro for a little bit. And so, you know, that journey, you know, that I had from high school to college specifically, you know, similar to that of what Philip was saying, that, you know, it wasn't meant for us. I wasn't meant to go to college. Even, you know, some of the trauma that I got from my own dad that he carried with himself with his own alcoholism and drug use is I would hear things like, you're not college material. You're not somebody that can do that. And I think he really thought that, you know, he didn't do that, so there's no way that you can do that. And so again, that's my own trauma that I carry. And so in that neighborhood that I grew up, you know, my parents worked super hard. My dad, again, he went to work every day, but he struggled with alcoholism and drug addiction and those kinds of things. My mom, you know, she says all the time that, you know, she's an old soul. And so, you know, she took care of him. You know, my dad's 11 years older than my dad and my mom. And so she's like, you know, I took care of him because I knew what he needed. And so she carried him through. And he had passed away in 2010, but, you know, he's a good man. You know, he got clean. He was no longer under the influence of drug addiction, alcoholism for most of my life. When I hit 19, after that, he was no longer using anymore. So that's when he and I connected in a good way. But before that, you know, into talking and hearing from Paloma about food sovereignty and food scarcity and those kinds of things, you know, growing up, you never really know you're poor, right? And so you just kind of move along thinking that that's kind of normal. You know, there's a story that I tell all the time that, you know, my mom and I went to the Northside Community Center, and this is where they were handing out commodities food. And my mom waited in the car, and she was like, go in and get the cheese, the grape juice, and the condensed milk. And so like my little 6-7-year-old self with my little bag or whatever, selecting these things. And to this day, she's going to punch me in the face, actually. To this day, she's like, that didn't happen. And so the idea behind that, we're a proud people. We're a proud people, and we make something from nothing, and that's where our power is. But there's trauma that comes with that, and we carry that trauma from generation to generation. And so, my sister and I had to kind of figure some things out while my parents were getting on their feet. And so, my sister struggled with, getting pregnant early. I kind of connected to some negativity in my community. I'm generationally connected to gangs. So most of the friends I hung out with were all Northsiders. My dad was in a gang, my cousins were in gangs. And so it was a hard cycle to break. So you throw in poverty, you throw in, a little bit of trauma, you throw in some family stuff that kind of goes on. A young man carries that, and he carries that into his life. And so I definitely carried that into my life. I had no plans in graduating, had no plans in going to college. It just happened to be one of the counselors at North High School was like, you should go to college. This shouldn't be the end for you. And I'm like, college, whatever. And so, that journey for me was a difficult one because it took me like 10 years just to get through like basic stuff in college, just because my brain wasn't wired in that way. And so, I carried a lot of that trauma with me, trying to figure things out for myself because I had no goal. I had no plan for myself. It was really just to stay out of trouble, stay out of jail, maybe. And there's this unspoken thing in my neighborhood. And I think a lot of people in my situation felt this, that I wasn't like completely down for like a hood, where I wasn't doing that kind of stuff. I wasn't selling drugs. I wasn't doing drugs. I wasn't doing any of that kind of stuff, but everybody around me was. And so it was just a matter of time before I got caught for something, is what I had figured. And then I got to my senior year and none of that happened. I was working. I was potentially going to college, going to CCD Denver. And I had kind of a plan for myself. And so that journey for me, like I said, was a difficult journey because none of those things I thought would happen. I didn't think I was going to graduate. I didn't think I was going to go to college. And then, I was on my path, and then I myself ended up having a kid by the time I hit 22. That's my daughter, Sierra Perez. And then my son was born, 10 and a half months later. We had him pretty close together. And so, I carried a lot of that with me, and I thought that was going to be the saving for me to stay out of trouble and all those kinds of things. But, I still had some stuff to work out because, my dad was not the best father growing up. He became a great grandfather to my kids, but he was never the best father to me. So I didn't have a lot of those lessons. And so, the idea when you graduate from my neighborhood, if you're not like super smart, super college bound and those kinds of things, the idea is that either you're going to end up in jail or dead, or you become like a cop. You go to the other side of the line. And that was my thought, that I can't go to jail. I'm not really, into the gangs and all that kind of stuff necessarily. So I thought my plan was to be a cop, and that was the trajectory for me. So in college, I got a job in a group home working with kids out in Morrison, Colorado. There was 23 kids. They were all Department of Youth Correction kids. And I thought, this is my path. I have a voice. I thought when I was working with these kids, and I thought I could share something through my experiences. And so I was about 18 then, 19, when I graduated and got that job there, right after 19, just before 20. And so I worked there for about 2 years and got another job working for University Hospital. And for whatever reason, working with kids and the whole family therapy and counseling and all that kind of stuff, it just came kind of natural to me. And so I thought that was my path. That's the path I'm going to take. And that's what I choose. And that's what I'm going to move forward doing. So I'm still going through school. And then I get a job working for the government. It's the juvenile diversion program. So that's where I spent the next 20 years. And I convinced myself that these systems were definitely problematic, but I thought I can come in and kind of change the narrative a little bit because of my experiences. The problem that I didn't realize is that a lot of these systems are rooted in white supremacy and white laced systems, that there's no changing those systems, right? And so all these systems they're data-based, they're based on transaction and numbers and these kinds of things. And so as much as I try to fight against that, the more and more I realized I was contributing to a problem. And, working with Philip and the policy work that he's doing, him and the program that he works with really outlined that for me and how we're contributing to the negative outcomes in our communities. And so there is kind of not where I began my healing and my liberation, but, I had that kind of base already. And so, I have a real good friend whose name is Joseph Padilla. We call him Jojo. And about 10 years ago, he was like, bro, come to sweat with me, come sweat lodge, come to ceremony with me. And I'm like, that's not my way. Because like I said, I grew up in a way where you don't want to connect to your community and your neighborhood. You want to cross the fence because you're like, I don't identify with that. So through high school, I was asked to come to Mecha and some of the other community programs, but I'm like, that's not me. I don't want to do that. So, there's this sense of like, I can't connect to my own people because I only recognize them as being in jail, gangs, drugs, all that kind of stuff. And so that was my lens for the longest time. And so, like I said, about 10 years ago, I was invited to come to ceremony. I went to a couple of sweat lodges and I just felt like such an imposter, right? I didn't feel like I connected to my indigenous ways. I didn't feel like I had that base. And so I struggled with it. And so, a few years later, there was a program that developed out of California from a larger entity called the National Compadres Network. And they were facilitating multiple programs, but I went to a training for a program called Joven Noble, El Joven Noble. And, mind you, I had done multiple drug and alcohol programs, multiple intervention treatment programs. That was kind of my thing with substance use and treatment and those kinds of things. Behavior modification programs, this kind of stuff. But again, it's all rooted in this kind of white supremacist way, right? And so again, I convinced myself that I can add something to that changes the narrative that the system is. But once I was exposed to one ceremony and then I got exposed to Joven Noble, that program is rooted in your sacred purpose as somebody of color. And to me, I just didn't really look at it from a lens that was me, that I was that kid who needed that. But I also realized that it's not too late. I had very good, elders and some elders that kind of helped me out. Angel Perez has been a significant role in me reclaiming a sense of who and what my cultural identity is. And so, re-indigenizing myself is really, I heard this word a few years back and it just made so much sense to me. So I was a facilitator of Joven Noble, and it's again a character development program for young men to kind of find their sacred purpose in their life and understanding that they can bring their trauma to a space and that's where their power is. And so this idea that I had, that I was this kid from the north side, this kid that grew up with, this idea about either you in a gang or you go to jail, all of these things, all of these misconceptions that I had about myself, going through ceremony and learning the Joven Noble program and understanding what a sacred purpose was, really allowed me to kind of discover my sacred purpose. And so since then, it's been about 7 years and I've been holding circle for healing spaces since then. I've joined multiple sweat lodges. It's kind of a regular thing for me to kind of go to ceremony. About a year and a half ago, I sat up in my first teepee meeting up in Wind River, the reservation there with the Arapaho people. And I was hooked. It just made so much sense to me that re-indigenizing myself so I can find my sacred purpose. And that's where the lens is, where I can share with some of our people in our community. And so the question about why CCFC, that's the reason why. I found what my sacred purpose was, and CCFC is the absolute platform for that. It's culturally rooted in indigenous ways. It's an anti-racist organization. It is restorative. It discusses how we recover from our generational trauma, but also how we recognize what our generational blessings are. And so that is significant for me. Yes, we have the trauma, but we also have blessings, and it's in our food, it's in our danza, it's in our cedar, it's in our teepees, it's in our sweat lodges, and that's where this program is rooted in. Yeah, we facilitate all of these programs. I facilitate Joven Noble. There's a mentoring program by the name of Calpuli that we work with our kids just to expose them to things that they wouldn't, youth retiros, those kinds of things. The restorative justice program that Frida helps me with, the Restore program, all of these things are important. But what's important for me in making the transition after 20 years to come to CCFC is that it's rooted in that indigenized way. And so that's such an important thing in terms of how we move forward as a people. It informs what Philip does in policy making, that we reflect on who our people are. It's rooted in what Paloma is saying in terms of food sovereignty and creating a healthy food option for our communities, because our people don't get the healthy food options that they need in our communities. And so, and it's also rooted in what Frida's doing in terms of the young women's programming, the Girasol, the Huiliti program, all of these things, we expose our kids and our communities to this indigenized way, but it's with a sense of a sacred purpose that we have as we move through our trauma, but also recognize what our blessings are that we've been given through our ancestors. That's the reason for that altar. And so, Angel Perez, she's our executive director, and she has created the space for us to be able to express these things. And I'm honored. I'm deeply honored by it. And so hopefully that answers the questions about why I do the work that I do. It's very much so rooted in my own trauma, and I'm still learning. I'm still indigenizing myself in terms of like learning the ways, learning my Native American songs, learning the Nahuatl way, learning my Mexica heritage and all of these things. I'm learning to tie kettle drum so I can understand what the drum means. That heartbeat for our people is really what the work is rooted in, is that drum sound. And so that's such a significant thing for me. And lastly, my vision moving forward, to expand the work. I've been hired as what's called a deputy director, and I joke about this. I don't know what that means. I just love the work. I love the people that I work with, and everybody on this screen, as well as the people that I work with, have such a passion and a love for what they do, and a love for the community, and a love for the people, and a dismantling of that system that we've all been kind of part of is really a driving force behind a lot of what we do. So say about that much, and aho, and I'll pass the palabra back to Frida.
Thank you, John. Thank you for sharing your palabra with us today. You sparked a lot of like inspiration in me of like, like re-indigenizing, right? And like why it's really important to root yourself in la cultura cura. And, I think of it like in the programs that I oversee with Girasol and Huiliti. And I did share a little bit this with you, John, but just thinking of like, I wish I had me when I was younger, right? Like the person that can walk, with me to re-indigenize, because I went through the same thing as you, John, like feeling like an imposter, like, no, that's not me. And trying to live like, also like in this country, being an immigrant, trying to balance being Mexican, but also living here and being undocumented, and what that meant for me. So based on our own experience, and now that the work that we do and the programs that we do, why is it important that you root your work in la cultura cura? So Paloma, like, why is it important for you to root yourself in la cultura cura when you are thinking of the next, food boxes, the next, healthy food initiative? Like, why is that important? Or for you, Philip, like, why is it important to root yourself in la cultura cura framework to inform these policies? And John, for you, why is it important to root yourself in la cultura cura to lead this organization alongside with Angel and seeing that bigger organizational side? So if you don't mind, Philip, going first.
Yeah, I think, the first thing that comes to mind is that like, wide isn't always right. And having an understanding of my own lived experience of how I was oppressed by these systems, it's going to take somebody who has lived and breathed under that oppressed hand in order to kind of help our communities kind of come through and break out of these cycles. Secondary to that, we have to have a deeper understanding of who we are as a people and where we come from, and that we are the original man, and that these white practices were not ours. They are not our way of life at all. We are truly the people of the sun. And so it's important for us to kind of lead with that. And it's important for us, for our youth and our community, to see people who look like them in these spaces doing the work and helping lead the way. So it's very important for another young man to see somebody like myself who has experienced what I have experienced, but also been able to kind of, come through the mud and be able to change things and come back and give work to my community and also give, valuable life lessons. So it's rooted. Our work is rooted in cultura cura. It's rooted and who we are as a people. And I'll pass it back over to Paloma.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to give cultural foods, you know, based off like my experience with food banks, or you know what other people have said. They don't really give, you know, foods that our people know how to use. And how John said earlier as well, like adding on to that, there's blessings in our food. So I think it's important to provide our people with that, you know, uh not let it die, you know, give them things they know well and they know how to use. Yeah. I'll pass the palabra to John.
Thank you, Paloma and Philip. It's such an important question, and you know, it's a really difficult thing to explain to folks why La Cultura Cura is such an important piece and why we stay focused on reclaiming who we are culturally. And it's a rainbow of cultures, right? We're not just talking about one. Like I identify as Mexica, I have Blackfeet in my family, Hopi. I don't know those traditions very well, and so you know, I stick to the Nahuatl way, and I'm learning that way through that lens. And so, just re-indigenizing myself in terms of my own healing, in terms of how I recover from the systems that have created this colonialism in my brain, right? This colonized way of thinking of how I do things. And it's a complete unlearning of it. And so you have to kind of go back and take a look at what are those blessings. You have to go to your, you know, I'll use the example of my mom. My mom makes sopapillas, right? And she showed me once years ago, but I don't remember, but she knows how to make it just from memory. And there's medicine in that. There's a healing medicine that my mom provides us because there's a story about where she learned that. And when I was a kid, my mom and dad would take my sister and I down to Pueblo, Colorado, where the state fair is. And I have these memories that are absolutely good. And so there's like a six-legged cow or something like that. There was like this Ferris wheel. But when you reflect back on your life, and especially, I guess, as a young man, when I'm young, you know, I remember those times being good. And so my mom learned how to make sopapillas because we had Indian tostadas down there, and it's basically the sopapilla. It's kind of like a tostada with beans and meat and all of that. So my mom makes them to this day, the sopapillas, and every time I eat a sopapilla, you know, I'm reminded of that, the good times. There's all kinds of stuff in my life that was going on, of course, with the internal stuff. But whenever I have sopapillas now, I go to this place and it makes me emotional because it's such a good memory for me. And I had to have somebody tell me that's the medicine. That's what we're talking about. And so when we talk about these white systems, like diversions and probations and all of these kinds of things, there's this colonized thinking that we have that if we have some mental health problems and issues, that the answer is going to these places like mental health facilities and these kinds of things, taking medication and those kinds of things. So I don't want to minimize, you know, mental health in any way, because I know some people absolutely need that, but our people also possess medicine. They also possess that healing energy. And so we just haven't tapped into that. And so the reason why it's important to stay connected to that La Cultura Cura way of thinking is that we can heal our people. We don't have to look to these systems for all of these answers because we have them within ourselves. We have them within our own ancestry and history and lineage. We just have to tap into it. And until you learn how to re-indigenize, until you realize what your sacred purpose might be, then you can begin that journey. And that's why we're here, to bring our people to that space, to bring our young folks to that space, to remind them that they have a sacred purpose. And there's a reason why they're here. And there was a proverb that I heard somewhere, and I live by it. And I tell my kids this all the time. You're the dreams of your ancestors. Your ancestors sat hundreds of years ago dreaming of what the future would look like, and you're it. You're the dreams of those ancestors. And that's why it's important to stay connected to that idea about La Cultura Cura. I'll say about that much, and I'll pass the palabra back to Frida.
Thank you for sharing that all. And before we close, John, you were talking about, like, you know, our ancestors dreamed of, you know, of this, and prayed about it and really set the intention for us, right? So now thinking of it, like, we putting ourselves in that place now for the future generation. So if you have children, what dream do you have for your children? If you don't, what dream do you have for the children in your family, like younger siblings or anybody younger in your family? You know, just looking, also putting ourselves in the center, right? Because we have to look both ways, like our ancestors and the future. So Philip, do you can you start the palabra?
Will you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
No, yeah. So if you have children, what dream do you have for your children?
Man, that's a lot of dreams I have. You know, I think initially I want to say that I don't want to say that I have a dream for them. That I think the very first thing that I want them to, you know, have an understanding. I had children very young. I had my oldest son when I was 15 years old. And I was 16 when Teresa finally gave birth to him, and I had 3 kids by the time I was 19. I am 37 now, and I have 5 boys. My youngest boy is 11 years old, and so in essence, I've kind of grown up with them. My 3 older boys are 21, 20, and 19. And right now they're at a stage in life where they have a little more understanding of, I don't want to say the way the world works, but slightly they're starting to grasp, you know, kind of how the world kind of turns. And so because I have grown up with them, I'm still kind of pursuing my own life and my own goals. You know, I've pursued my, you know, my educational career. I pursued my athletic career. My mother was a heroin addict, and as an adult and as a man now, I absolutely understand and have grace for who she was and why and how she was masking the pain, you know, through her addiction. I never once felt neglected or not loved. Again, it was just the norm for us. So I would hope that my boys have an understanding as they grow to be young men, that they give me a little grace, and they just have an understanding that, yo, I'm just trying to fucking make it too. And at no point in time do I wish that I hope that they don't feel neglected, and just understand that I am trying to be the generation that alters the path for the next generations to come. So it takes a lot of sacrifice on my part. It takes a lot of time away from home, time away from my family, and those things like that. So I would want to say that my dream and hope for my children is that they have empathy and understanding. And I'll pass the palabra over to John.
Right on, Philip. That was really powerful, man. You know, it's it's helping me kind of reflect a little bit on my own response. You know, like I talked about my dad a little bit earlier, and you know, he was clean by the time I hit 19, and then a couple of years later, I had my first kid, Sierra Perez, and then like I said, 10 and a half months later, I had my son John. And you know, there was a message he gave me. And that message was that every generation needs to be a little bit better. He had so much like repair work to do with me, because he had this notion about him that he had to be hard on me. You know, he'd get in my face and point his finger in my chest and all that kind of stuff, accusing me of, you know, being high or drunk or whatever. And so, and again, that's when he was high and drunk. And so he was really just kind of, you know, deflecting that on me. And so, you know, there was some struggles we had, especially when I had about 16 to about 18 before he got clean. But when he got clean, you know, I could do no harm at that point, meaning that he really worked on repairing that for me. And so, you know, I'll always carry that with me, that he had to go through what he had to go through in his life to be able to get to the place that he was at. And so he stayed clean for the next, 40 years, 30 years. And he became a better grandfather to all of the kids in my family. So we have tons of them. So, and his message to all of us was always, every generation should be a little bit better. So I passed that on to my kids. And so they know to this day that that's what their pa told them, is every generation gets a little bit better. So, my dad had to carry the stuff that he carries. And, I tell my kids, I joke around, I'm like, your dad's dumb, man. I'm not a smart person. So, and they giggle, whatever, and they say, you're smart, dad, and all that, like kids do. But, John and Sierra are amazing people. And so, I really believe that, like we talk about our generational trauma, those generational blessings are also passed down. And so it moved through me, that message that their pa and their nana sent in terms of what they had to go through, living through the things that they did. But that medicine goes through, and that's why I believe this work. And that goes with anybody that comes through, not only our program, but my family as well. Like anybody else, I'll bring this into the space that my family's struggling right now, my extended family. And so, I was having a debate with somebody fairly recently about, your responsibility once you get to a place where you're comfortable and you're no longer hurting for anything. Like my wife Autumn and I, we had to go through it. We didn't have everything handed to us, but we made something from nothing. And now that I'm here, I have a responsibility to come back and share that love and share this medicine with my family the way that I learned it. So I wasn't raised in this way. I learned this way over the last 10 years. And so my kids weren't raised in this way, but now I'm slowly exposing them to this. And so John and Sierra are going to come into Sweat with me in the next month. And so they're going to begin their journey with reclaiming their cultural identity and take a look at their sacred purpose through the lens of our ancestors. And that's what I want for my kids. What I do plan on doing is, I'm going to bring his name into the space. I have a nephew, his name is Justin, and he's going through it, and his family's listening, and he's going to be brought into the fold so I can share this with him, so he can use the medicine of our people to help him heal, because he's also going through it, loss of his dad, lots of other things. And so, Justin, I bring you into this space with love, man. So with any young person that we bring into the space, it's with that idea that we need to find their sacred purpose. And if they don't know what that is, it's our job to help them with that. And I'll say about that much, and I'll pass the palabra to Paloma.
Thank you. If I ever do have children, I guess a dream would be, for it or them to have people like the people at CCFC. Like, I feel like me and Frida could relate to this. Like, now we look back and we're like, oh, damn, we wish we had this when we were little or before. And so, yeah, I hope they have that from throughout their whole life, the people like you guys, the safe space, the healing, the support, all of that. So they're able to connect with themselves and their people. Yeah. I'll pass it back to Frida, the palabra.
Thank you all for sharing all of that. And I know, like, I keep saying thank you after every time y'all speak, but it's really, really important to thank y'all, because your palabra is really important. There is people watching that, something will resonate or a seed will be planted. So I just wanted to truly name that. Like, I'm not just saying thank you just to be nice. It's really I really thank you all for sharing your palabra today, and I appreciate you all. And now that you all came onto the team, I'm curious to know one commitment that you have to keep the work moving forward at CCFC. And we can start with John.
Thank you, Frida, for that. No, it's a great question. How we move forward, how we continue to move forward. When I came on to CCFC a month ago, Philip was here. I think you had been here about a year, Philip, I believe. How long you been here? 6 months? Year?
I've been officially on for about 4 months, but I've been subcontracting and having a working relationship with the organization for about a year.
Gotcha. And then Frida, you're 4 years? Paloma, oh, you've been here a while.
Maybe over like a year.
Okay. And so, I'm coming in only with a month under my belt doing this work with CCFC. I've done a little bit before getting here, but, Angel's been here 10 years, started a program from nothing and built it to what it's becoming now. And, she had some help. It was just two people, Itzel Santos and Angel, for a number of years, and then everybody else was brought on. So they made something from nothing. And so the vision and the mission of this particular agency is, like we keep saying, it's rooted in La Cultura Cura, right? And so supporting community from a variety of different angles. It's in policy, it's in food, it's in women's programming, it's in young men's programming, it's in the space that we talked about before, the LGBTQ and two-spirit community. So it's all inclusive for all of our people in the community. And it's rooted in anti-racism, dismantling the system, and really empowering our folks to do things in a good way. And so, I am honored and blessed to be part of that experience. So the responsibility that I have, we can talk about all the stuff that's on the outside bubble, right? I'm the deputy director. I don't even know what that means just yet, because I'm developing it. I know what it means to facilitate programs. I can organize those kinds of things. I can organize community. I can support some of the younger people in the space so they can find their sacred purpose. Frida and you and I have talked quite a bit over the last month, and I can be that support for you. And Philip and Paloma, that's the outside bubble stuff. But if I'm not doing the work, if I'm not continuing to find my sacred purpose and expand it, because I still have, portions of my behavior in my brain and all of that, that's still rooted in colonialism, right? And colonized thinking, because that's all I've done most of my life. And so staying close to the fire is kind of what we call it. Staying close to ceremony, staying close to the ancestors is really how we continue this work. And so, like I said, I'm honored and blessed to be part of such an amazing team of young people doing amazing work with the food sovereignty, with Frida with the women's programming, Philip doing the policy work, Angel doing the executive director work. And, we're going to expand, with all of these brains in the room and all of this passion in the room, with the love for our people and our ancestors, only good things are going to come out of that. And all of you know what we're currently working on now with the land grant. And so part of what we're doing now moving forward and maintaining, that way in terms of the mission of CCFC, it's always going to be about our people in the community. So again, that land grant where we're going to purchase land to own land for our people so they can come to a safe space, that's the journey from here. And we're going to add the sweat lodges, we're going to add the teepee, we're going to add all of this stuff that keeps us grounded and rooted in our people's way, in our ancestors' way. That's what guides everything. And my commitment to that is to make sure that I'm constantly growing. I'm 46 years old, but I'm still a student to the game. I'm still a student in learning these ways. And so in no way am I a maestro like Jerry Deo out in California. Now, I have a lot of bros, they probably wouldn't consider themselves this way, but my bro Cisco Gallardo, Joseph Padilla, Felipe, there's tons of young men that I can look to and support. But the women are leading the charge here at CCFC, and I'm blessed to be part of that. Philip talked about this earlier, that, we're the children of the sun. And I'll close on this, that I read that the fifth son from the Aztec way, for a lack of a better word, the Nahuatl, right? So the fifth sun has set, and now the sixth sun is rising. And that sixth sun is with the feminine energy coming to this space and guiding us in a good way. And I'm honored to be part of that. And so, like I said, I'll reiterate, my commitment is to continue to learn, to continue to re-indigenize and focus on my sacred purpose, so that can inform the work moving forward in terms of, the structure of the program, the facilitating healing spaces. It's all rooted in that re-indigenizing myself so I can maintain my sacred purpose. Say about that much, and then I'll pass the palabra to Paloma.
Okay. I think a commitment I have is to keep, doing trainings and educating myself, on food nutrition, gardening, and honestly, anything necessary. Like, to be able to share that knowledge with my community and, you know, uphold CCFC's values and their mission. Yeah, I'll pass the palabra to Philip.
You know, with my new introduction into this world of policy and being able to sit into these discussions with the National Center for Youth Law and the team that is with the Youth Justice Initiative, and understanding how and what it takes for policies to be changed and how oppressive these policies can be. My commitment and vision is to continue to educate those that are around me that these spaces are meant for us. In order for us to truly make the change, we have to be willing to be uncomfortable and put ourselves within these spaces and have an understanding of how to change these systems from the top down and from the bottom up. For years, I felt like I had like imposter syndrome. You know, I never completed the 8th grade. I got my fucking GED at 19, got a degree later in life. So I always felt that I wasn't, you know, good enough, smart enough, and those type of things. But now in these spaces, this lived experience and experience in the framework and the lens that I have, it's invaluable. You can't get that with a PhD. You can't get it through formal education. The formal education gets you a seat at the table, but your lived experience keeps your seat at the table. My vision and hope is to continue to build with my community and give them this understanding that, yes, education is important. Having these degrees do help. Having an understanding of the way these systems work is important, and we need to make the decision on how and when, and we decide to disrupt these systems. Looking at it from a top down approach, putting our people within the right spaces, whether they become lawyers and they become advocates for our communities, or we have an individual who decides to stay within the community and do grassroots work, direct service work with young men and women of color. It's important to have that visual and have an understanding that we can be in both roles. We can be at both seats and we can be at all the tables, and to never feel that we're not worthy to be within these spaces. So my vision is just to continue to kind of educate, you know, those around me and give them an understanding of what these things and how these systems work, and we do belong in these spaces. I'll pass the palabra back to Frida.
Thank you all once again. And just to close this out in a good way, I will also share my commitment. I think when I look back and again, thinking of like what I've shared, that I wished I had a me in my life when I was younger. And my commitment is to walk the healing path with youth. Not necessarily, pull them or walk in front of them. I'm walking alongside of them, and to make that commitment internally, right? My vision is for youth to heal, but also if I'm not doing the healing, then how do I expect other youth to do it too, or continue their healing path? So that's one commitment that I make to keep the work moving forward as CCFC. So with that, I want to thank you all for taking your time today to share a little bit about your palabra and your programs and the issues and all that. Philip, do you have something to say?
No.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were waiting for me to shut up. Sorry. But have a good night, everybody. Thank you for being here. For the audience, thank you for listening to us. I hope that you all stay warm if you're in Colorado. If not, hope you enjoy the warm weather because we're freezing here. Palabra, and I hope that the altar and the smoke and the love and the blessings got to you, even though it was virtually. And thank you, John, for holding that down for me. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.